The roar of the floodwater still echoed in Lily Anderson's ears as she clung to the remnants of what had once been her family's homestead. Her knuckles white against the weathered wood of her father's hope chest, the only possession she'd managed to save. It was May of 1875 in the New Mexico Territory, and the spring that had promised renewal had instead brought devastation, as the normally docile Pecos River transformed into a raging monster that devoured everything in its path. Jack Yancey saw the figure huddled against the muddy remains of a cabin while riding his paint mare along the river's new shoreline. 3 days after the floodwaters had receded, he'd been checking for strays from the Diamond Cross Ranch, where he worked as foreman. What he found instead was a woman with copper hair plastered to her pale face, clothes caked with drying mud, and eyes that held the vacant stare of someone who'd seen too much. "Miss," Jack called, dismounting in a swift, practiced motion. His spurs jangled as his boots hit the sodden ground. "Are you hurt?" The woman turned toward him slowly, as if his voice had reached her through a thick fog. Her dress, once a cheerful yellow calico, hung in tatters around her slender frame. "They're gone," she whispered. "All of them, swept away." Jack approached cautiously, removing his hat as he neared her. Up close, he could see the scratches on her face and hands, the exhaustion etched in lines around her eyes. She couldn't have been more than 25, but grief had aged her. "My name's Jack Yancey, madam. I'm foreman at the Diamond Cross, about 10 miles west." He gestured to the chest she guarded. "Is that all that's left?" She nodded, a single tear cutting a clean path down her dirt-streaked cheek. "My father's chest and me, just me now." "You can't stay here," Jack said gently. "The ground's not stable, and there might be another surge if the rains come again." He extended his hand. "What's your name, if you don't mind my asking?" "Lily," she replied, her voice stronger now. "Lily Anderson." "Well, Miss Anderson, I can't leave you here alone." Jack's eyes scanned the desolation around them: uprooted trees, debris scattered across what had once been farmland, the bloated carcass of a cow half buried in mud. "You'll never be left again, not if I have any say in it. Will you come with me to the ranch? We can send word to your kin from there." Lily's fingers tightened around the chest handle. "There's no one to send for," she said flatly. "My parents, my brother Thomas and his wife. The water took them all while I was up on the ridge collecting herbs." Jack felt a familiar ache in his chest. He knew loss. His own parents had died of fever when he was 16, leaving him to make his way alone in the world. "Then you need somewhere safe even more. Can you ride?" For the first time, a spark of something like life flickered in her eyes. "Since I was 6. "Good." Jack whistled for his horse. "We'll strap your chest to the saddle. You can ride with me back to the ranch." As he helped secure her father's chest, Jack noticed how Lily's hands trembled. Despite her claim about riding, she seemed barely able to stand. Without asking permission, he lifted her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "Hold on," he instructed, reaching around to grasp the reins, effectively encircling her with his arms. The ride to Diamond Cross was slow, Jack keeping the horse at an easy pace to avoid jostling his passenger. Lily sat rigid at first, then gradually relaxed against him as exhaustion won out over propriety. By the time they reached the sprawling ranch house, she was half asleep, her head resting against his shoulder. Martha, the cook and housekeeper, came bustling out as they approached, her gray hair escaping from its bun, apron flapping in the breeze. "Jack Yancey, who have you got there? Lord have mercy, she looks half drowned." "Flood survivor," Jack explained as he dismounted, then gently lifted Lily down. "Her family's gone, Martha. Their homestead, too." Martha's lined face softened with instant sympathy. "Poor lamb. Bring her in, bring her in. I'll heat water for a bath and find her some clean clothes." Lily stirred as Jack carried her toward the house. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "I don't doubt it, Miss Anderson, but not today," he replied, nodding to a ranch hand to retrieve her chest from his horse. The Diamond Cross was owned by Edward Thornton, a cattle baron who spent most of his time in St. Louis, leaving Jack to manage the day-to-day operations. The ranch house was grand by frontier standards, 2 stories with actual glass windows, a broad veranda, and furnishings imported from back east. Martha led them to a spare bedroom on the first floor. "Put her here," she directed, pulling back the quilt. "Now shoo while I get her cleaned up and settled." Jack hesitated, strangely reluctant to leave. Lily's eyes had opened fully now, and she was looking around the room with bewilderment. "You're safe here," he assured her. "Martha will take good care of you. I'll check on you later." Outside in the hallway, Jack gave instructions to send one of the hands to where Lily's homestead had stood to search for any survivors or recoverable possessions. Though from what he'd seen, he held little hope of finding anything. "She needs a doctor, too," he told Martha as she shooed him from the room. "Send Billy into town to fetch Doc Wilson." 3 hours later, after overseeing the evening feeding of the cattle and checking on a mare about to foal, Jack returned to the house. He found Martha in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with vigorous slaps. "How is she?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Sleeping now." "Doc came and went. Says she's exhausted and probably hasn't eaten in days, but no serious injuries." Martha paused in her kneading. "That poor child, Jack. She woke up screaming while I was helping her bathe, thought she was drowning again." Jack's jaw tightened. "Did she tell you what happened?" "Some. Said the water came in the night. Her pa got her mama and brother's family up to the loft, but the whole cabin started breaking apart. She climbed out onto the roof, but it collapsed. Next thing she knew, she was clinging to a floating piece of wood. When the water receded, she found herself about a quarter-mile downstream. She spent 2 days searching for her family before going back to what was left of their cabin." Jack shook his head, his coffee forgotten. "I've never seen the Pecos rise that fast before." "Been the wettest spring in memory," Martha agreed. "And that family built too close to the riverbank from the sound of it." "What will she do now?" Jack asked, more to himself than Martha. The housekeeper gave him a shrewd look. "That's not for us to decide, is it? Though I notice you brought her here instead of to town." Jack felt his face warm. At 32, he'd been the subject of Martha's matchmaking attempts for years, but this was different. Towns flooded out too. Besides, she was in no condition to go further. Hum, Martha hummed knowingly. "Well, she can stay as long as she needs. I could use the help in the house anyway if she's willing." Jack nodded, relieved. "I'll write to Mr. Thornton, explain the situation." He headed for the door. "Let me know when she wakes up." "I want to tell her about the men I sent to look for her family." "Don't go getting her hopes up," Martha warned. "If that river took them, chances are slim they'll be found, at least not." She didn't finish the sentence. "I know," Jack said grimly, "but we have to try." Lily slept through the night and well into the next day. Jack found himself checking on her more often than was strictly necessary, telling himself it was just concern for someone in his care. When Martha finally sent word that Lily was awake and dressed, he was in the middle of breaking a particularly stubborn Mustang. He handed the reins to one of the younger hands and headed for the house, ignoring the knowing grins of the cowboys. He found Lily sitting at the kitchen table, her hair now clean and brushed into a simple braid. Martha had found her a dress, probably one of her own from years ago, as it hung loosely on Lily's frame. But despite her ordeal, there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. "Miss Anderson," Jack greeted her, suddenly awkward as he stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "It's good to see you up." "Mr. Yancey," she acknowledged with a slight nod. I haven't properly thanked you for your help yesterday." "No need for thanks," he replied, taking the seat across from her when she gestured to it. "Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true." Her green eyes met his directly. "Most men would have left a stranger to fend for herself, especially in these parts." Jack shrugged uncomfortably. "I sent men to where your homestead was to look for your family or anything that might have survived." Hope flared briefly in her eyes before dimming. "Have they returned?" "Not yet. They'll be thorough, I promise." Jack hesitated. "Miss Anderson, Martha tells me you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. The ranch owner is away, but I'm sure he'd have no objection." "That's very kind, but I can't impose. If you could arrange transportation to the nearest town once your men return, I would be grateful." "And then what?" Jack asked gently. Lily's composure wavered. I don't know. I have some small savings sewn into my petticoat, perhaps enough for a ticket east to my mother's cousin in Philadelphia." "You don't have to decide anything right now," Jack assured her. "First, you need to regain your strength." Martha, who had been pretending not to listen while stirring a pot of stew, chimed in. "That's right. And while you're here, maybe you could help me with some of the household duties. I'm not as spry as I used to be, and these cowboys make more mess than a herd of buffalo." Lily's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I'd be happy to earn my keep, Mrs. Just Martha, dear. No need for formalities when you're elbow-deep in dishwater together." A ghost of a smile crossed Lily's face, the first Jack had seen. It transformed her, hinting at the vibrant woman she must have been before tragedy struck. "Thank you, Martha. I'm a hard worker. My mother taught me everything about keeping a home." "I've no doubt," Martha said approvingly. "Now, Jack Yancey, make yourself useful and bring in more firewood. Supper will be ready in an hour." Over the next week, Lily gradually integrated herself into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Martha with cooking and cleaning, mended torn shirts for grateful cowboys, and even assisted with tending the kitchen garden that had survived the floods. Jack found reasons to be in the house more than usual, drawn to her quiet strength as she rebuilt her life piece by small piece. The men he'd sent to search for her family returned with grim news. They'd found the body of her brother Thomas caught in a tangle of debris 5 miles downstream, but no sign of the others. They had, however, recovered a few items from what remained of the homestead. A family Bible, miraculously preserved in a tin box, a set of silver spoons that had been her mother's wedding gift, and a small portrait of her parents on their wedding day. Jack dreaded telling her, putting it off until evening when the day's work was done. He found her on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, making room for him on the wooden bench. For a few moments they sat in companionable silence. "Your men found something, didn't they?" she finally said, her voice steady. Jack turned to her, surprised. "How did you know?" "I saw them ride in this afternoon. They had something wrapped in canvas." Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. "Tell me." Gently, Jack relayed what the men had discovered, watching her face carefully. Lily listened without interruption, her expression composed, though tears slid silently down her cheeks. "Thank you for sending them," she said when he finished, "and for telling me the truth. I'm sorry it wasn't better news." "I knew they were gone," she admitted. "I felt it, but part of me kept hoping." Her voice broke and she pressed her lips together. Without thinking, Jack took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm evening, and he covered them with both of his. "We'll bury your brother properly tomorrow," he promised, "with a marker so you'll always know where he rests." Lily turned to him, her eyes shining with tears but also with something like wonder. "Why are you being so kind to me, Mr. Yancey? You don't know me." Jack considered his answer carefully. "My parents died when I was 16. Fever took them both within days of each other. I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel utterly alone. He squeezed her hand. I had no one to help me then. I swore if I ever saw someone in need, I wouldn't turn away. Jack, she said softly, using his first name for the first time. Thank you. They sat together until darkness fell completely, the vast canopy of stars appearing overhead. When Martha called them in for supper, something had shifted between them, a tentative connection formed in shared understanding of loss and survival. Thomas Anderson was laid to rest the next day in a small plot on a hill overlooking the ranch, where wildflowers grew in abundance. Jack had the ranch carpenter fashion a simple wooden cross with Thomas's name and the date. The cowboys removed their hats and stood respectfully as Lily read from the family Bible. Jack stood beside her, offering silent support. As the weeks passed, Lily's presence at Diamond Cross became less that of a guest and more that of a valued member of the household. She learned the ways of ranch life quickly, even venturing out to help with gathering eggs from the henhouse and milking the cows. The color returned to her cheeks, and she began to laugh again, a sound that Jack found himself working to elicit as often as possible. June arrived, bringing with it the first cattle drive of the season. Jack would be gone for nearly 3 weeks, taking a herd to the railhead at Dodge City. The night before his departure, he found Lily in the kitchen, preparing packets of food for the trail. "You didn't have to do this," he said, watching as she wrapped biscuits and jerky in cloth. "I wanted to." She tied the bundles with string. "Martha says the trail food can get monotonous. These have a little honey and some dried berries inside." Jack leaned against the doorframe, struck by the domesticity of the scene and how right it felt to have her there. In just a month, she had carved out a place for herself at Diamond Cross that seemed irreplaceable. "I'll miss you," he said, surprising himself with his honesty. Lily looked up, her cheeks flushing slightly. "It will be quiet without you and the men. Will you still be here when I get back?" The question had been weighing on his mind. Her talk of going east had diminished but never completely disappeared. She set down the bundle she was wrapping. "Do you want me to be?" "Yes," Jack said without hesitation. "Very much." The directness of his answer seemed to startle her. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "Martha needs help, especially with her arthritis getting worse, and I've found peace here that I never expected to find again." Relief washed through him. "So you'll stay?" "For now," she agreed. "At least until Mr. Thornton returns and decides he doesn't want an extra mouth to feed." "Edward won't mind," Jack assured her. "He's always saying Martha works too hard. Besides—" He trailed off, suddenly unsure how to express what he was feeling. "Besides," she prompted. Jack crossed the kitchen to stand before her. Tentatively, he reached out to tuck a stray lock of copper hair behind her ear. "Besides, I'd like the chance to get to know you better, Lily Anderson." Her eyes widened, but she didn't pull away from his touch. "I'd like that too," she whispered. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. Then Martha's voice called from the pantry, breaking the spell. "Lily, where did I put the dried apples? These cowboys will want pie when they get back, mark my words." Jack stepped back, a smile tugging at his lips. "I should finish packing. We leave at first light." "Be careful," Lily said. "Come back safely." "I promise," he replied, meaning it more deeply than any promise he'd made before. The cattle drive was grueling but successful, despite a stampede caused by lightning and a tense encounter with rustlers near the Kansas border. Throughout the long days in the saddle and longer nights keeping watch, Jack found his thoughts constantly returning to Lily, wondering what she was doing, if she was healing from her losses, if she was still finding her place at Diamond Cross. He sent a brief letter with a returning cowboy who'd injured his arm. just a few lines to let her know they were safe and making good progress. When the Diamond Cross riders finally approached the ranch after delivering the cattle and collecting payment, Jack spurred his horse ahead of the others. As the familiar buildings came into view, he spotted a figure in a blue dress waiting on the porch. His heart leaped in his chest. Lily shaded her eyes against the setting sun as he galloped into the yard. Jack dismounted in one fluid motion and closed the distance between them in long strides. "You're back early," she said, her smile lighting up her entire face. "We didn't expect you until tomorrow." "Push the men a bit harder than usual," Jack admitted, suddenly aware of his trail-worn appearance and the dust coating his clothes. "I wanted to get home. Home." The word hung between them, taking on new meaning. "Martha's made a feast," Lily told him, her eyes never leaving his face. "And the bathtub is ready behind the kitchen. She said, and I quote, 'Don't let that man near my clean floors until he's scrubbed off half the territory.'" Jack laughed. "That sounds like Martha." He hesitated, then reached for Lily's hand. "I missed you." Her fingers curled around his without hesitation. "I missed you too. The ranch isn't the same without you." That evening, after the returning cowboys had bathed, eaten their fill, and regaled those who stayed behind with tales of the trail, Jack and Lily found themselves alone on the veranda once more. The night was warm, crickets chirping in the darkness, the scent of blooming wildflowers carrying on the gentle breeze. "I have something to show you," Lily said, leading him to the small plot where her brother was buried. In the moonlight, Jack saw that the area around the grave had been transformed. A neat fence surrounded it and flowering vines had been planted at the base of the cross. A small bench sat facing the marker. "You did all this?" he asked, touched by her efforts. "It helped me," she explained. "Working with my hands, creating something beautiful from grief." She sat on the bench, patting the space beside her. "I come here to talk to Thomas sometimes, and to remember my parents and Sarah, even though they're not here." Jack joined her, his shoulder brushing against hers. "It's beautiful." "While you were gone, I decided something," Lily said after a moment of silence. "I'm not going east. There's nothing for me there but distant relatives who wouldn't even recognize me. My life is here now." Joy surged through Jack, but he tempered it with caution. "Are you sure?" "You don't have to decide based on gratitude or it's not gratitude," she interrupted. "Or at least, not only that." She turned to face him fully. "When the flood came, I lost everything I thought defined me, my family, our home, the life we'd built. I thought I had nothing left. But then you found me and you said something I can't forget." "What's that?" Jack asked, though he remembered every word of their first meeting. "You said I'd never be left again." Her voice was steady, but he could see the vulnerability in her eyes. "No one's ever made me a promise like that before." Jack took both her hands in his. "I meant it, every word." "I know," she replied simply. "That's why I'm staying." Under the vast Texas sky, Jack did what he'd been thinking about for weeks. He leaned forward and kissed her gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Lily Anderson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it hasn't been long, and if you need more time, I understand. But I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment I found you by that ruined cabin." Her eyes glistened with tears, but her smile was radiant. "I think perhaps I started falling in love with you when you carried me into this house and promised me safety." "I want to give you more than safety," Jack told her. "I want to give you happiness, a home, a future." "Are you proposing, Jack Yancey?" she asked, a teasing note in her voice despite the gravity of the moment. "Inelegantly, but yes." He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "I am." "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes." Their second kiss sealed the promise, a beginning born from tragedy but looking toward hope. The wedding took place in September when the brutal summer heat had faded and the landscape was touched with the first hints of autumn gold. Edward Thornton, summoned by letter, arrived from St. Louis in time to give his blessing, and a generous wedding gift a parcel of land adjacent to the Diamond Cross, with permission to build a home of their own while Jack continued as foreman. Martha outdid herself with a feast that drew people from 3 counties. The small church in town, recently rebuilt after the flood, was filled with cowboys from Diamond Cross and neighboring ranches, townspeople who had come to know Lily during her trips for supplies, and even a few travelers passing through who were swept up in the celebration. Lily wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha and the women of the town had worked on in secret, adorned with lace brought by Mr. Thornton from St. Louis. Jack, uncomfortable but handsome in a new suit, waited at the altar with barely contained impatience, breaking into a wide smile as his bride appeared at the church door. "Never seen the boss look so nervous," whispered one of the cowboys to another. "Not even when facing down that gun-slinger in Abilene last year. Different kind of courage," the other replied sagely. "Man's giving his whole life over to another's keeping. That takes guts." After the ceremony and celebration, Jack took his bride home to the ranch. While their own house was being built, a project the ranch hands had enthusiastically taken on, they would stay in the foreman's quarters, a small but comfortable cabin near the main house that Jack had renovated and furnished with items ordered from catalogs and brought by wagon from San Antonio. As he carried Lily over the threshold, she laughed with pure joy, a sound that still made his heart skip a beat. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yancey," he said, setting her gently on her feet. "Home," she repeated, looking around at the simple but cozy space they would share. "I never thought I'd feel at home again after the flood." Jack pulled her close, breathing in the scent of wildflowers that always seemed to cling to her hair. "That day by the river I made you a promise. Do you remember?" She nodded against his chest. "You said I'd never be left again." "And I meant it," he murmured, tilting her face up to his. "No matter what comes, Lily Yancey, we face it together. That's my solemn vow to you." "Together," she agreed, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "Always." 1 year to the day after Jack found Lily clinging to the remains of her family's homestead, they stood together on the porch of their newly completed house, watching the sunset paint the western sky. Lily's hand rested protectively over her swelling belly, where their first child grew. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How life can change so completely," she replied. "A year ago I thought everything was over. Now," she smiled up at him, "now I know it was just beginning." Jack placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling a flutter of movement beneath his palm. "Our son is restless today, or daughter," Lily reminded him with a laugh. "Martha is convinced it's a girl." "Either way," Jack said, "this child will never know what it's like to be alone or abandoned." "That's my promise." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they stood together in the quiet contentment of love that had been forged in tragedy, but had grown strong and true with each passing day. From the devastating flood had come not only loss, but also the greatest gift, the chance for 2 wounded souls to find each other and build a life neither had dared to imagine. "I love you, Jack Yancey," Lily whispered, leaning into his embrace. "And I love you, Lily Yancey," he replied, his voice carrying all the certainty of a man who had found his true north. "Forever and always."